Sukkot. It is a feast that is at the end of 7 feasts that start in the spring and go to the fall. And Sukkot is a feast of ingathering. It's a feast of celebration. It's a feast of recognizing that God has given us everything that we have. And in an agricultural society, which was the world of the people that God originally called to himself, they understood that there was setbacks, that there were difficulties, that there were problems. You know, the security that the modern industrial revolution has had in terms of food is something that has been very new and very unusual. In fact, the attempt to end up creating food that's highly processed in the West, in the United States and Western Europe, we've made very processed food because of other eras and other times where people have really gone hungry and where there has been starvation and where there's been difficulty. One of the things that happens is if you take a look at pictures from the 1930s in the United States, which is just about 100 years ago at this point in time, you will see people who are gaunt, people whose faces are hollow, people who are very skinny, and people who did not have enough to eat. And from the 1930s earlier in history, it was not uncommon for there to be pestilence, for there to be mildew, for there to be insects or wildlife that would come through and that would eat the crops and leave people in a position where they believed that they had planted enough, they believed that they had gardened enough, they believed that they had calculated properly the amount of food that they needed, only to find out something unexpected had happened and that they were going to come up short. Now, whether we end up having difficulty or whether we end up having a bounty and a plentiful harvest, it was understood in biblical times that God himself was the provider of everything that we had, that God cared for us, that God loved us, that as we prayed to God and sought him, he would see to it that we were taken care of. And one of the things that you'll run into in the Hebrew Scriptures is God says again and again, if you seek me, if you worship me, if you draw close to me, if you live as I instruct you to live, what is going to end up happening is you are going to have provision such that everything you need is going to be taken care of. So I'm talking about Sukkot, and what we often do during Sukkot is we will take and we will build a booth. And as we take and as we build a booth, what ends up happening is this is a place that we may end up doing devotions in. This is a place that we may end up taking meals in. This is a place that we may end up visiting with friends in. There's all sorts of things that you can do in this booth, but by taking and making opportunity for us to do parts of our lives in these booths, we indicate that God is the one whose heavens is above us. God is the one who provides us weather that we can operate in. We understand that God is the one who has given us opportunity to have finance, to have agriculture, to have provision for the homes that we live in, and provision also for what God has done in terms of providing for food, clothing, and other essentials and other things that we have need for. Everything that we have comes from God. Sukkot is a celebration of the fact that the entire season that starts in the spring and ends in the fall and provides us with the ability to live year-round is all a gift from God. And I think that sometimes people are concerned because they feel like it isn't a matter of God taking care of them, but it's a matter of them having to do what is necessary to take care of themselves. I think also sometimes what ends up happening is people end up looking to businesses, looking to corporations, looking to financial and governmental entities, saying this is what really takes care of us. And if you are concerned and if you believe that you are tied to entities run by human beings in your generation and your time, you have reason to be anxious, because it has been shown again and again that corporations are not always benevolent. Governments are not always benevolent. Businesses are not always benevolent. And what ends up happening is sometimes people are in a position where they depend on that which they have kind of a friendly and kind of an adversarial relationship with. And particularly in modern times, corporations have been taught at Harvard Business School and other institutions not unlike it, that the more money that they can make for shareholders and stockholders, this fulfills their financial or fiduciary responsibility. And if they can keep their costs down, then they are in a position where they can give more money to shareholders. Now, if this is not balanced with an understanding of their responsibility to their employees, sometimes what ends up happening is companies end up being less than gracious, less than generous, and less than fair to those who work for them. This is not always the case, but sometimes it's the case enough of a time such that the employees start to view their employers in a fashion where they believe that they are being cheated or taken advantage of, or that bad things are happening. And as all of this works out, what it does is it creates a society where there's a certain amount of adversarial relationships between groups that could otherwise be very cooperative with each other. And if there isn't a balance of an understanding that each one of us, whether we are people of great responsibility or if we perceive ourselves to be people of very little responsibility, we will all stand one day before a God who will judge us all. And if this does not end up being an overarching part of the world as we live in it, we might find opportunity to take moral shortcuts. And so Sukkot helps us look at how everything is going to end. It takes a look at the end of the season of the harvest. It takes a look at the end of the season of the world in this age. It takes a look at how God has started things, how God has made provision, and how God is with us when we rejoice and wrap up as we give thanks for everything that God has given. But this has implications for how we live as a society. This has implications for those who can employ people. This has implications for those who have collective organizations like governance and corporations. This has an overarching sense of concern for people who are employees in such organizations. But if you are a person who is an individual, I really want to encourage you, because the truth of the matter is simple. The truth of the matter is this, that God truly is your provision. And God may use businesses, He may use government, He may use corporations, He may use other structures and other entities in this present age to help provide for you, but they are not your provision. God Himself is your provision. And when we come to the end of a season or a point of harvest, or when we come to a point where it's time for us to rejoice, we need to remember and we need to know that you live in a temporary structure. You won't always be here. We also need to know that God has given us the strength, the energy, the vitality, the intellect, the emotion, the drive, and all the rest of what is necessary for us to be able to succeed in the ways that we succeed. And also, ultimately, God is the one who causes us to have skill and cunning in our hands, be able to do what provides us with finance, and God is the one who provides for us. And everything else that I've discussed in this video are all tools that God uses to take care of his children. May you have a great harvest, and shalom.